3 days since the war the Middle East has never seen before ended, all of us, whether you're in Tel Aviv, Tehran, London, or New York, are still trying to figure out what just happened and where do we go from here. Speaking of New York, this is where our guest host is at, and also the new battleground for American politics, and maybe more than that, it's unholy. I'm Yonit Levy in Tel Aviv.
And I'm Nuseir Yassin in New York, also known as Nas Daily. And for the first time ever, it is not two Jews on the news. It is one Jew and one non-Jew on the news.
I mean, it doesn't rhyme, but I still think it's awesome. I mean, Nuseir, awesome. Look, we had you as a guest, and we have been since then harboring our secret plan to have you as a guest co-host, and we're so glad that it worked out. We should say one of the longest running and most successful digital creators in the world. Would you like that title? Is that good? Do you want me to alter it in any way?
No, I appreciate the honor. Thank you. I'm excited to do this. This is exciting.
It is. It really is. We're both very excited. Our team is excited. And I should also say that, like you were on last time, when you were on, you had that, we should say to people who are listening or not seeing you on YouTube, you have the t-shirt. It has the bar with the time of your life that has been spent up to now. I think last time was less. Now it's 43%. It's totally freaking me out. And the one thing I have in my head is just to say to myself, women live longer. Women live longer.
Very accurate. You don't have to die at 100%. You can die at 120%. So, but yes, last time we met, I was 42% done with life. Now I'm 43% done with life. Every 8 months of your life is 1%. But you know what I learned, Eat, is that sometimes decades happen in 12 days.
Yes.
So it's not really linear.
True. I'm thinking to fit with the weeks that we just had. Maybe you should have had like a bar that says enriched uranium and change that just for the past 2 weeks. I mean, but definitely.
And what do you think it is now? What do you think the enriched uranium is now?
Who knows? I mean, if you ask Trump, the whole thing has been obliterated. If you ask the New York Times, it's been set back, maybe months. So it's a big question. We had a whole podcast about that yesterday. Definitely a big blow for Iran. That has to be said. And these 12 days will go down in history. But where we go from here is a very big question.
Yeah. This is an amazing example of how the emperor is naked. Everybody thought the emperor had so many clothes made of gold, made of ballistic missiles. And now Lebanon and Syria woke up and realized that the emperor is actually naked. Iran is not that powerful. And why the hell are we, we had to say the word hell. But, it's if the emperor is naked, I should be with the emperor that has a lot of clothes. And that is Israel in this case, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, it really is. We have so much to talk about with what it means for Trump and for the region and for Israel and for the other states here, neighboring states. But before we do all that, you have to tell us where this whole thing caught you, where you were during these 12 days.
So for the first time ever in 8 years, I listened to the instructions. And the instructions was every Israeli should hide where they are and should just not be public. And I was like, okay, I'm going into hiding. And I just didn't create content about where I am. So I was just in Singapore and in Dubai, but I didn't tell the world where I am. I decided to just focus on my business because I was actually for the first time worried for my safety because I'm Israeli and, would be a great target for Iran.
So you didn't share your location at any point during these days?
And my girlfriend made sure I don't do that either. She was very worried.
Wow, because you think that people would see you as an Israeli. I mean, you are an Israeli, but I'm not sure that's the immediate thing that people know about you.
Well, I think it would make the news if I was harmed. Unfortunately, but yes, I believe at this point I'm counted as Israeli.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I tried to think if I don't need to share, hide my location anyway. It was just home, studio, bomb shelter, home, studio, bomb shelter. So it wasn't very during those days. But it's really interesting to me that you say about the countries in the region that have now figured out, maybe they knew this before in a way, but now they figured out, what the actual balance of power is. I'm really curious about the fact you said you were in Dubai. I'm curious about the fact that not a lot of them are saying this public, which is not different, but you would think maybe things would be different after the war.
I coined this as the world's most silent celebration. And so I have a few Lebanese and Syrians and Egyptians in my company, and they're all celebrating. Their families are celebrating. None of them want to be associated with Iran. So I think there's this giant tidal wave under our feet of just hundreds or tens of millions of Arabs just realizing Iran is not going to be there to save you. That's good. That's really good. No? What do you think?
I mean, I think that it's always interesting to me. I found myself thinking this week about Shimon Peres, former president of Israel, who always, this was after the Oslo Accords, he thought it would come from the peace between Israel and the Palestinians, but he talked about the new Middle East, Mizrach Tichon Chadash in Hebrew. And he was mocked for it internally in Israel for sure. And now you see these signs that maybe, and if you add to that the Steve Witkoff saying we might have more countries joining the Abraham Accords, that just happened on the night between Wednesday and Thursday. And you think maybe we are looking at a world where Iran is not the threat that it was, and that maybe there are possibilities here that we didn't even think of before. Or we were talking a lot about the normalization of Israel and Saudi Arabia, but maybe Indonesia, maybe Syria, maybe who knows? Like, where can this go? If we're taking the optimist version, right, then the world is opening up, or the Middle East is opening up.
If you were to bet, what would you bet on joining the Abraham Accords?
I think Saudi Arabia is a more complicated thing. I mean, your mind goes automatically to that, but it's more complicated, and it will have to entail the end of the war in Gaza, which I think we are heading into anyway, because, the latest developments are there's more and more talk about that, and more talk that Trump wants that as, quote unquote, a payback for his assistance on the Iranian issue, his assistance to Israel. So I don't know if Saudi Arabia is the first, but again, Indonesia could be an interesting thing. Perhaps a Syria. Wow. I mean, I don't know. This could go in all kinds of directions. And you know this better than I do. You were in Dubai. You were in that, so you hear the voices coming out from there. It's so interesting. I was in Abu Dhabi a few months ago, and it's strange how as an Israeli you feel comfortable talking Hebrew everywhere, and in Europe you find yourself being a little more careful where you would speak Hebrew out loud. I mean, that just, I think, goes to show it's indicative in a way of how that peace has been quite successful, I think, to this point.
It's so funny you mentioned that. I feel more comfortable wearing my t-shirt in Dubai than I do in New York. I feel comfortable being publicly Nas Daily because I know that the government is here to protect, while you don't feel it as much in Europe and the United States. But if I were a betting man, I'm not a betting man, but if I were a betting man, I would bet that Syria would be the one to join the Abraham Accords for a couple of reasons. One, it's like, this is the time to make radical change, right? Everything goes now. You can redraw the country, you can redraw the peace treaties, you can do whatever. And number two, I don't feel like the Syrians felt much support from the Palestinians over the last 15 years. I do feel like a lot of the Palestinian factions are very like single issue voters. If you support me, I will give up on everything just to get my Palestinian state. And I feel like the Syrians have felt like, okay, well, you don't seem to care much about us, so I don't know why we should care about you. And the same thing happened in Kuwait, right? At some point, Kuwait kicked out every single Palestinian because they sided with Iraq. So we see that happening many times where I'm going to bet on Syria.
That's really interesting. I think it will unfold. I think one thing we can definitely be sure of, we are not living in the world of, Woodrow Wilson and the 14 points and a very, elaborate plan about peace and prosperity. It's just the president tweeting out what he thinks or posting, right? The map of the Middle East is being formed on the Truth social feed of Donald Trump, and you refresh it every couple of minutes to understand where this is going. I mean, that is, to me, I try to talk to generals and statesmen and see where the president is heading. The truth is that you would be so smart on saying it because you're an expert on social media. We're in the realms of that more than, and maybe human psychology when it comes to Trump, than we are in the realms of like this organized foreign policy objectives, I think.
So that is interesting. I think sometimes we confuse social media for something was actually much bigger that's happening. It's authenticity. Mm-hmm. I don't think the average human has ever loved the suit and tie look of a politician and the really well put together studio. I think they've always loved knowing that this person is the same as me. So social media is just a window into who the person really is. And we see Andrew Cuomo, for example, in New York. I mean, he used social media a lot, but he just never popped up on anyone's feed because it was never authentic. So people can really read into, are you being who you really are, or are you not? And whether you love him or hate him, like Trump is probably the most authentic president the world's ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get to Andrew Cuomo in the race in New York, believe me, later in our conversation. But I think you're right about that it is the authenticity that he's like, he says what he means and he means what he says. And you know, that with him is definitely true. I mean, when you think of him writing tonight, another important development that we saw, right? He was writing about Netanyahu's trial and calling it a witch hunt and saying it should be, canceled. It's just an amazing, to me as an Israeli, I remember, in the 90s, the Clinton Democrats and the Bush White House, and it was always like standing next to Israel, the bipartisan support, and you always talked about shared values. What you meant then was democracy. What you mean now with shared values is probably something about, we all hate the judiciary. But yeah, I mean, I wonder with Trump, and I always, I look at him and I'm saying, Richard Nixon brought that idea of the madman theory in foreign policy, right? That you're rational, but you act like you're irrational to score points, whether it's a negotiating table or anywhere else. I don't know if with Trump, the irrationality is actually a guise or actually a ploy, right? It seems like it's the actual thing. It could work in the same way that it worked for Nixon in certain areas, but it's really interesting thing. I do think that he has his eye on the ball, and the ball is a Nobel Peace Prize. I'm pretty sure of that. I'm still sure, even with that, notwithstanding what happened in Iran, I still think that he wants deals, that he wants peace, that he wants, Obama had that, he wants it too. Like, I think maybe it's a superficial analysis of his character, but I'm pretty sure that is what he wants. And, it does connect to the whole, we're expanding the Abraham Accords, of course, into that.
Very interesting. My take on this is slightly different. My take on this is, I don't know if he cares much about the Peace Prize. I mean, given that I feel like it's losing value as all institutions are.
Maybe he wants the EGOT. You think he probably wants the EGOT, right? He wants the Emmy and Grammy. Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, Tony. Maybe that's what he's aiming for.
Probably that has more weight for him. But I actually think businessmen in general are not into war. This is a very controversial statement, but I think he's like fundamentally a businessman, and the businessmen are wired in the idea of like, you benefit, I benefit, and we both have a rising business and make money. If somebody is like trained from the beginning to be a politician, I feel like for them war is part of the cards you play with, and death is a card you can play. Let me kill people. Mm-hmm. But I feel like businessmen never think, oh, let me go kill my supplier. It's not something you think
Only
about.
if it's good for business.
I've never seen that happen in the business world. My bet is that we just need more businessmen and women to become politicians, because by definition, they're more peaceful. They're more extractive economically, but they're less inclined to be going to war. I could be proven wrong.
No, I think that's really smart. And it helps you, it gives you a window into understanding even Trump's Middle East visit, right? Because if you think of it as he came there as a businessman, then everything makes sense, including the Qatari plane. What, you wouldn't, even if you're rich, you wouldn't want a $400 million plane? Like, sure.
Yeah.
So it all makes sense. And the deals with the Saudis and even leaving Israel out of it for that point, it all makes sense. It leads us, though, to that question, which is, are we, going to see bigger moves here? Including a move, when a lot of Israelis saw that post that he wrote about Netanyahu's trial, really going into the weeds of the trial, right? And Netanyahu and Trump is not a going into the weeds kind of guy. So obviously someone helped with phrasing of that post. But you're saying, wait a minute, he's also not someone, and goes back to your businessman point. There are no free lunches. He doesn't give this for free. He wants something from Netanyahu. But after Iran, after, saying you have to cancel the trial, he's waiting for something. I mean, that has to be where we're at this point.
Yeah, but I feel so optimistic. I feel like for the next, we're about to enter 15 years of peace. And maybe I'm going to go and regret these in the next year or one day, you never know. But I feel like we're on the verge of 15 years of calm. And the reason I say this is because for the first time in almost 2 years, Israel has an off-ramp, which is, look at us. because of that attack on October 7th, we were dominating Iran. That almost feels like an off-ramp, which is we have kind of won what we wanted. What we wanted is just no threats in our border, and we just cut the head of the snake or the head of the octopus or whatever. So I might, let's say, we're not betting men, but we should be betting like all businessmen do. I think it'll be 10 to 15 years of peace. Maybe a couple of people join the Abraham Accords, and Netanyahu is willing to give in something because he just got so much.
I mean, honestly, I would sign on that dotted line for 15 years of peace. I would sign 15 minutes too. So I hope you're right. I mean, look, you are really an incurable optimist, and that's a good thing, and it definitely helps you survive in this world. And I hope that we are looking at a very long, peaceful time. I don't know if anything can promise that. I think you've been doing these really beautiful content. Some of it is really, it's gorgeous. It uses AI a lot. And it kind of, during the brief Iran-Israel war, you showed how once indeed there was peace between Israel and Iran. And you also showed how you think there will be peace between Israel and the Palestinians. And it's so great to see that. I don't know, I mean, to this region that is, I don't want to say cynical and skeptic, but, a little bit of both.
Yeah, but you know the saying, right, is like, optimists feel like they're trying to sell you something. Pessimists feel like they're trying to help you. It almost always felt like we listened to pessimists more because they're like, oh, you must be the expert, you must be right, and I believe you, you're trying to help me from danger. Biologically, we're wired to listen to pessimists. But really, the only people that made money in the stock market in the last 50 years are optimists.
Yeah.
Anything you shorted, you probably lost money on if you shorted the S&P or anything. So optimism actually does generate returns. And I'll give you a couple of reasons why I'm optimistic. I mean, I saw this video in Qatar, people running away from the rockets, and the whole Gulf just for one night felt what Israel felt for the last few decades, right? The rockets falling on their country. They want the Iron Dome. For the first time ever, we had this shared humanity of shared fear of rockets falling on us. And I think, on that one night, I saw the Gulf just move to the left, move towards Israel and not towards Iran. So that was really optimistic. Syria is is a great development. Lebanon is great development. No Hezbollah rockets to mention. I don't see. The reason I said there's going to be 15 years of peace is because I'm guessing there's going to be World War III at the end of it between China and the United States. Okay? But I'm saying for the next 15 years,
that doesn't qualify. That doesn't qualify as optimism. Okay, great. So wait, just so we go back to this on what we bet on. So study Chinese, obviously.
For sure.
So 15 years of peace and then World War III between the United States and China.
Well, it does seem like Taiwan is going to have to be resolved, and it does seem like China will take Taiwan. Look, I have an office in Singapore, and so I've worked with many Chinese nationals, and they are by far one of the best people to work I've ever hired in my life. I've hired more than 30 nationalities. So when it comes to Chinese way of working, Chinese way of science and development, I think that if I were ever to be scared of anything in the world, it is a China-US confrontation.
I'm with you on the China-United States thing. I think that the fact that the world is looking at China and thinking that all of that, what is happening internally and the sort of economic financial growth doesn't at some point want more than that, I think is wrong. I think we're not looking in the right direction. There was a book that came out, actually fiction, that started with what was called Ghost Fleet a few years ago, that started with a war, Russia and China against the United States. And I started reading it. I said, this doesn't feel like fiction to me, and I'm putting it away.
Wow.
But I think you're very accurate in what can happen in that regard. I'm not sure that we are looking at, a peaceful Middle East. And maybe I'm saying that just because, I'm from that generation that grew up with the Oslo Accords. And I have this memory in my head of watching them sign. I was a teenager. They were signing it on the White House lawn. And I remember really, saying to my parents, there's going to be peace. And I remember my parents saying, wait, it's never this
That's
simple.
interesting.
And
What do you think could go wrong?
it's the Middle East. I mean, everything. But first of all, nothing yet has been entirely made right in the fact that there is, an ongoing war in Gaza. People are dying every day, whether it be Palestinians, Israeli soldiers. Only this week, 7 died. There are 50 hostages still being held. Out of them, Israel thinks that at least 20 are alive. Until that open wound is fixed, we won't be the same kind of nation.
Yeah.
So I think that starts, with where we are. There are really a lot of internal arguments in this country, and it's really hard to sort of, take your head above all of that and see the bird's eye view. But perhaps when that is over and everyone can start, building their lives back, it can be a different world. But I think there's such a long road, and Israelis have not even begun because of this prolonged war to even start and deal with what happened to them on October 7th and what happened since. But I'm being less of an optimist, and your optimism is contagious. So I'm gonna hold on to that.
I do agree with you. The operation in Gaza, it does seem like it needs to come to an end very, very soon. This is the moment.
I mean, even you had a member of Knesset from the United Torah Judaism Party that said this week, it was Moshe Gafni, and he said, I don't understand what we're still doing there, why we're still fighting. And you have ministers from the Likud, the ruling party in this country, that are also saying this, not in their own voice, saying it to reporters. So you feel like there is a question here. Why is this continuing? Israel won its war against Hezbollah. It's won its war currently against Iran. Why are you still saying that, the Netanyahu claim that is saying we need to continue this until we win the war against every single Hamas terrorist in Gaza? That's not going to change, I think. I do want to talk, though, a little bit about, again, the work that you have been doing, and also how we think that could, to be very, very blunt about this, how this can save the world. But no, how this can really make the world a better place. I mean, can you inject some more optimism in our conversation?
I think 30 years ago, if you wanted to reach 1 million people, it would cost you $1 million. That's why you could only have Al Jazeera doing all this content, because it was really, really, really expensive to do that. And if you notice, over the last 3 years, the cost of content has gone to almost $100. So what used to cost us $10,000 a year ago now costs us $100 because of the AI technology. Now we can recreate shots, visiting the Pope, and you can recreate the Pope saying things which otherwise would be impossible. And you can do it in Arabic, you can do it in Hebrew, you can do it in whatever. So you can actually reach hundreds of millions of people for very cheap now, which means the democratization of content. All I'm saying this is, I think Israel, what Mossad did in Iran, which was so amazing, these operations that were so impressive, we need a Mossad for media. What is that Mossad for media? Building out these content, these channels in Egypt, in Iran, that infiltrate not the commanders and the military, but infiltrate the mind of the average person, and just tell them that Israel is here to exist, and we're not your enemy. We want to coexist with you in peace. I think a Mossad for media is needed, and unfortunately, not enough attention was paid for this in the last 20 years. But maybe in the next 20 years, it'll change.
That is a lot. I mean, Mossad for media is a good slogan, I think. I just wonder, I mean, brand Israel is having a tough time. Let's put it, as delicately as we can. And I have a friend, Jeffrey Goldberg, who edits The Atlantic, once said to me, Israel acts like it has a PR problem when it actually has a problem, which is something I keep in my mind for a long time. So I don't know. Again, you talk about, and I think you're right, about having this content sent to, made in Israel or made that is definitely more pro-Israel than what we have been seeing. Let's maybe start with the fact that most Israelis don't study Arabic, sadly, because that is what the education system looks like. So that would be a difficult thing. But even if you do, how do you get that to be on a larger scale? I mean, as you say, you don't need much. You need the ability to have these AI, videos and travel the world with them, basically.
By the way, everything I'm saying now is 1 month old. So there's been a technological revolution a month ago by Google. They released a video model. It's called VO3. Just that model has enabled us to get more than 100 million views since it started a month ago. So
Wow.
Without that
So everything
model,
you've done for that month got 100
Yes.
million views? Wow.
Yes. And it would be impossible to do a month and a day before. Now just think about that. This is new.
So what is tell us more about that technology. Like, what does it do
So
that
that technology-
didn't exist before?
Yeah, it's basically now I can just ask it, hey, create a video of the Pope saying, I love Nas Daily. And you can see a realistic
Oh, that's authentic.
version.
That actually exists. It's in Latin, it's in Hebrew, it's in Arabic. I saw it. It really exists.
Yeah, it really exists. So I can imagine any world. Imagine me next to Dr. Martin Luther King watching his speech. You can see that and it feels very realistic. I think before, a month and a day before, it was just like the technology wasn't quite there yet. Now it's there. So I'm telling you now, imagine 5 months from now, it's going to be double there. It's going to be double as good. I just wouldn't sleep on what's happening now. I think anybody that's interested in politics should obsess over this new technology because it opens up doors to build 100 channels in Iran, in Farsi, today.
I'm curious, by the way, how many people are listening to you or seeing your videos in Iran? Do you have the data on that?
I wish. No, I want to. But by the way, I'm about to make a decision to build a Farsi channel. I'm just in the process of raising the funds for it. But a Farsi. This is the time for a Farsi channel.
It is. It really is. I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But you're making it sound wonderful. And I mean, if I could take it to my sort of imagination, then I would want to sit with, I don't know, let's bring Shakespeare and Queen Elizabeth I and have a dinner party with and Oscar Wilde, and
That's
we're good.
a good idea.
And we're good. But there are downsides, obviously. The more this looks real, the more you can fake.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a paradox, but it makes it a very dangerous thing, particularly in politics, by the way.
You're absolutely right. I love how I love the how I'm like a blind optimist and you're like a smart pessimist.
So I'm just the person from the news. I'm just going to poke you every time and say, but wait, this is a bad idea.
But you saw this thing when Iran went dark because there was no internet. Pro-Scottish independence accounts went also dark on Twitter.
Yeah.
Indicating that there may have been an Iranian plot to promote Scottish independence on Twitter. And
Amazing.
There's so many accounts that are like super American accounts that are run by Abdul in Pakistan. So yes, that's why I do think it's a Mossad for media, because this is war. Media is war. It's not fun, let's have fun, let's make videos. It's, if you don't do this, someone else is going to get access to VO3. They're going to paint an Israeli doing something really, really crazy in Sri Lanka, and you're going to get every Sri Lankan to hate Israelis because of a fake media created by this model that I'm talking about. So this is a race and a war. And I just don't feel like enough people are paying attention to it.
It's so interesting. I remember at the beginning of the war, right after October 7th, I had one of the leaders of the Jewish community in New York. She was talking about what was happening on campuses. And she said to me, we were for years trying to figure out what the right wallpaper for our house on campus is. And everyone else was figuring out the war is in a completely different place. And you're so right about this media thing and this media war, which we, again, as Israelis, seem to be losing terribly, and particularly losing it with the sort of age group that you're a part of, maybe even younger than that, the 20-year-olds, the 30-year-olds, which does, kind of beg the question, how do you turn that around? I mean, is it just a lot of content dropped on the heads of a lot of people? Is that the math here, or is it something deeper?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think that's it. We can never win the game of just absolute numbers. Israelis, there's too few of us. But maybe media is becoming more of a technological race, because in the past it was a creative race. A creative and a financial race. Who has the most money and the most reporters wins the media race. Now it's like, who has the biggest and the most and the strongest AI agent that creates the most number of videos. And if it is a technological race, that is good news for Israel. Again, optimism wins, because whenever there's technology, Israel wins.
Okay, I'm writing all this down and I'm going to throw it in your face when you're wrong. This is what I'm going to do. No, I hope you're right about everything.
Let's meet again in 15 years. We'll meet in the bunker, the real bunker for World War III.
Exactly. I hope we meet before that. But yeah, I mean, just at some point, the t-shirt's going to go, the bar is going to freak me out even more. So I don't know, in 15 years, oh my gosh. But this all begs, I mean, look, we are walking into the direction, and we can't kind of avoid that conversation of the Zohran Mamdani story in New York, the mayoral race, the Democratic Party primaries. I mean, because he ran, and let's try, just for the outset of this conversation about him, just a cold analysis of the campaign he ran, which was a brilliant campaign, we should say. And it plays with a lot of things.
I'm hearing your opinion for the first time.
Okay, well, let me fix that. Many would say that it was a brilliant campaign. And it was. I mean, doesn't he in your book get a 10 out of 10 for the way that it's so interesting. You talked before about the businessman in suits and how he was he was the socialist in the suit, and it worked. It worked for him.
I hope my girlfriend is not listening to this podcast because she gets angry every time I say this.
No, I hope she is listening. And then, okay.
But look, that guy is hot. First of all, he is attractive. Like, let's just call a spade a spade. When somebody is attractive, you kind of don't ignore everything they're saying. They could like smile at you in an attractive way and say, I want to kill you. I want to make you go broke. And it's like you're still listening to them and you're so fascinated by them. So I think one, he's got his looks going well for him. And number two is, you're right, he made the suit and tie look cool. He's in the streets of New York. He's never in an office. He's always outdoors. Even the tiniest details that people don't notice. The filter he uses for the video is warm. And I know this because I make those videos. He puts a warm filter. And that makes a big difference between all the cold filters that other politicians use. The microphone, it doesn't peak. I mean, it's just perfect. The subtitles in the videos, the localized language. If you make one video in English, he makes another 10 videos in Hindi.
Yeah,
right?
Which is amazing when you're running for office in the United States, right? You're talking in a foreign language. I mean, that in itself.
So, I mean, disregarding his policies, I'm a big fan of how the campaign was run. And no one on the right has been able to match that, other than Trump.
Yeah, I mean, look, after saying all that, I think, again, as an Israeli, when you look at that, just on the basic thing, to be part of a mayoral race, even if it's the most important city in the world, but part of a mayoral race that is happening 9,000 kilometers away, it doesn't feel great, right? But I mean, on the policy side, if we could go into those
policies?
Look, I would say this as simply as possible. He doesn't like Israel. I get it. But I think just on a deeper level, look, I feel, and I have been feeling increasingly since October 7th, constantly gaslit. Like the world is trying to tell me that I'm not seeing what I'm seeing and I'm not hearing what I'm hearing. Yeah. I'm going to annoy a lot of people by this comparison, but this goes to Elon Musk and, no, that isn't a Nazi salute, right? The world trying to convince me it's not a Nazi salute. And it's Zohran Mamdani. I know what I see, right? And it goes to Zohran Mamdani and Globalize the Intifada and trying to convince me this is a call for equal rights for the Palestinians. And either not acknowledging that there are a lot of people who see this as a call for violence or not recognizing your responsibility by saying that and not denouncing it. And in both cases, maybe Elon Musk is completely convinced that this is not a Nazi salute. Maybe Mamdani is completely convinced that this is just a call for equal rights. But you are a public figure, and you have responsibility when these things are said. And to me, I think that probably the saddest part of all of this is that what he is saying about Israel is not opening the door for dialogue. It's closing it. I mean, look at us. You are an Israeli from Arabe. I am an Israeli from Jerusalem, and not the fancy parts of Jerusalem, trust me. And we will, I hope, always be able to talk, even if we disagree on something. But the way that he talks about the Israeli issue closes the door to me. And it feels like it isn't about a dialogue. It's about getting votes. And that is what I'm bothered about. Look, in that debate that went viral, right, when everyone asked, where is your first foreign visit going to be? And everyone says Israel, because they didn't get the memo that doesn't speak to the younger generation of the Democratic Party anymore. And he says, I'm going to stay in New York, which, by the way, is a good answer. But then he is asked, do you acknowledge the state of, what is it? Do you believe in the Jewish state of Israel? It says, I believe Israel has the right to exist, which actually I think it angered some of the more woke extreme parts of his
Yes.
party. And then he is asked as a Jewish state, and he says as a state with equal rights. So it's a complicated point of view, and obviously most Israelis would have a lot of issues with that. But again, I think what to me is very troubling here is that it doesn't open the door, and more than anything, it makes Israel an issue that we don't want to be there. We don't want to be in the sort of extreme left part, and we don't want to be in the extreme right part. Look at what Bannon is saying about Israel. Look at what Tucker Carlson is saying about Israel, right? Pretending that Benjamin Netanyahu is the deep state that dragged Trump into a war with Iran. So, you used to be comfortably in the center, and now that the center doesn't exist, and that I'd say less and less, and I think that's a danger not only for Israel, but for other parts of the democratic world. I don't feel comfortable with all of that. I have been going on for a while, man. You take the microphone.
Wow.
Please talk.
No, I'm just thinking about that. I'm just thinking about what you're saying, and it feels like Israel is the greatest unifier in the world. Israel will unify a religious Muslim man in New York with a transgender person in Brooklyn together. Israel brought them together. Now that's amazing. Look, I mean, Israel is really healing the world. So that's my first realization, but which automatically means that we should always assume that unity is weak. It's shallow unity. It's unity. Yes, we don't like Israel. We don't like Zionists. But once that's not as cool anymore, once the war ends, then a transgender person and a devout Muslim man are going to meet together and be like, wait a minute. We have major differences here, and maybe we should have, not united. So I think that unity that Mamdani has now is temporary because Israel is helping them with that unity. That's number one. Number two is I don't understand. Yes, I get it. I don't like the policies. I'm not a fan, but I think there's maybe too much paranoia, and maybe I'll say this because the same paranoia existed on the left when Trump became president. We all thought 4 years. We're all going to die when Trump first became president. And the world did not die. The mayor of New York, how much power does the mayor of New York actually have? I think it's very limited. Yes, it's a scary signal. It's a scary symptom. It's we should be careful. But I live in New York, and I will continue to live in New York. I'm not as worried for some reason as many people are. And maybe I'm getting it wrong. What am I getting wrong, Unique?
I don't know. I love talking to you because I feel like I throw all of my pessimism in your way, and you put on these rosy tainted glasses and tell me how everything is fine, including the fact that everyone hates Israel and what a great unifier we are. It's great. It makes me feel. And first of all, you made me feel better, which is great.
That's so funny.
But I think that.
But am I getting it wrong? Am I off? Am I off?
No. I think. Look. First of all, you're really. Again, my opinion on this would be that what we're seeing in politics, and you're completely right when you're comparing it to Trump, because what we're seeing is when the Republicans move to the extreme, then the Democrats move to the extreme, right? That would be the Newton law of physics. Every action has its equal opposite reaction. That's for sure. And Mamdani is part of it. It's still the reaction to Trump, and it's still a party that doesn't know where it's going. It doesn't know. Does the AOC and Pelosi, do they still have a place in the same party? Where do the Liz Cheneys go? Where do the Romneys go? They don't have a place in this world and in these politics. And I think that, by the way, is something to notice. And you are talking about paranoia. I think it's concern. It might even be panic. And what I'm interested in and is that no one seems to be taking notes. I mean, if you're so concerned about Mamdani, by the way, it's not a done deal, right? And we will see a coalition, rising up against him.
New York voted for him,
right? Which is very interesting. And a friend of mine, I couldn't corroborate this, but a friend of mine actually said that most of his voters are white, which is also very interesting if true.
Yes,
and
I
then
saw that too.
it's interesting because that means that minorities didn't vote for him. But the point here, I think, is that you should, the important thing to do is to look at what he did and take notes. And from all of our analysis of his campaign, the one thing we kind of didn't say is that he stayed on message. And the message worked. And the message was affordability. We can't afford to live here. It's too expensive. Anyone who's in New York for the past years knows that's true. And I will fix that. And that was the main thing. It wasn't about Israel. And that made it, a really, if you stay on message, if your message is very clear, that's how you will manage to succeed, I think.
And that is such a great message. Look, I'm blessed to be the top 1% in the United States, But even when I moved to live in New York, I myself started to feel like this place is too expensive for me. And it just, paying $40 for a 10-minute Uber is the reason why you get people like Mamdani. I think Peter Thiel had this incredible insight a few years ago. It said, we always wonder, why do these college students, why are they attracted to this person? Well, we forget that capitalism does not work for these people. These people are in debt because of university. These people don't have money. They are seeing the reverse. They're seeing anti-capitalism. They're seeing their 7% interest rate make them more and more poor because of their debt. And so if the system is not working for you, why do you vote for the system? You should vote for the destruction of the system. And that's what we're seeing, people voting for the destruction of a system that did not work for them. So maybe a way to not get the Mamdani thing again is to really make sure capitalism works for everybody and not have, a large percentage of your population with student debt that cripples them forever.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And to see your parents and say, wait a minute, I'm not going to be better off than they were. And that is the biggest problem. It's not a problem only in New York and definitely not only in the US. Maybe you run for mayor. I mean,
I'm literally his age, 33. It's funny you say that. When I looked at him, I was like, man, he's doing such important work. Which is like, and what the hell am I doing? I'm making these like ridiculous videos. Like, I was like, wait, I should run for mayor in some city in the world, maybe Tel Aviv.
Well, I mean, come on. Are we launching this? Yes. Are we doing Yassin 2026?
Yeah, but you need your apolitical. So unfortunately,
I can't run your campaign. I can only secretly give you advice, but no, I can't officially run your campaign. I cannot. That is true. And I will never pretend to, like, if you come on air or whatever, I'll pretend we're not friends. Don't worry. Like, this is not. We will have to erase the episode of this podcast. We have this tradition on the podcast, which every week we choose when Jonathan will return from South America. I'm pretty confident that might happen someday next week. But we have this tradition where we choose the Mensch Award of the week and the Chutzpah nominee, the Chutzpah Award of the week. So
you go first. Who's the Chutzpah of the week?
I am going to give the Chutzpah Award of the week to member of Knesset Aryeh Deri from the Shas party. He said in a television interview this week about October 7th, he said, it actually saved the nation of Israel. This is his quote. For a small moment, he said, God has forsaken us, but ever since, he said, he called it a small moment, right? We took an awful blow that until now we haven't recovered from. But then he continues and says, but then God performed a big miracle. Trump was elected. And then he goes on to say all of Israel's, great successes since. It's that describing of October 7th, which is the biggest Israeli trauma, as a small moment. And you see the rewriting of the narrative to say, yes, this was terrible. But ever since, look at how we managed to recover and we won the war against Hezbollah and won the war against Iran. Just that wording of it and the way that Israelis, I think, felt like he was trying to change the narrative. Anyway, so that is my Chutzpah Award of the week.
Interesting. Okay.
You don't have to turn that into something optimistic. You just have to give me.
No, I have nothing to add to that. I'll tell you who the Mensch of the week is. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm going to put the NATO chief as the Mensch of the week because, I wanted to make it recent. For calling Trump daddy. Okay, that was for really playing to what Trump likes to hear, but for also getting that NATO unity and really forcing everybody to put 5% of the GDP into the NATO budget. It strengthens NATO. I think a stronger NATO is a stronger Israel. So I would say that. And if it wasn't not that, maybe I would say it was Trump for saying the F word. Really, Trump saying the F word is Mensch of the week for me because we are seeing authenticity. We're seeing an authentic expression of one's self. And now we truly believe that it almost that comment has made the entire Israel-Iran war, which was so serious and so tragic, it made it feel like, okay, we really actually are moving into peaceful times. Just two kids, fighting each other, and now daddy, as NATO chief calls him, is here to fix it. For something about that moment felt like we're all human. And I don't know why, but it felt that.
Yeah. So actually what you're trying to say is trying to convince me that we live in a world in which the responsible adult is Donald Trump, and I'm supposed to feel great about that. Oh, okay. I'll take that with me into my Friday.
I have many issues with Trump and Mamdani and everything. I wanted really in this conversation to focus on what can we learn from them so that we
Completely.
can copy and become
I
better.
completely get that. Nuseir Yassin, this has been a great pleasure. And
Thank
I
you.
hope
I
we do
enjoyed
this
being
again.
Jonathan for an hour. Really, I just, without the accent, but he's got a beautiful accent. But thank you. Thank you for having me, Unit. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you. And thank you to our producer, Michal Porat. And we shall see our listeners next week.